Hello, this is David from DN Cognitive Counseling. Tonight I want to talk about something a little different. And I want to preface this by stating this is not a political video to make a point one way or another. This is more about an observation that I'm seeing, and I want to know if I'm just seeing it as a microcosm in where I am because of the situation I'm in, or is this becoming more wide that people are not talking about? Over the last few weeks, with the amount of rising shootings in the area, specifically where I am, I'm hearing more and more of the people I'm working with having great trepidation with many of the fundamental aspects they're hearing from politicians, specifically coming from the Democratic side. And I'm wondering, is this something that's happening all over, given that there is a lot of violence in a lot of cities right now because of protests and different rioting, as well as some of the fighting between the federal government now and the city governments in terms of federal troops to send them in, protecting things, not protecting things. That seems to be one of the fundamental aspects I'm hearing, is a lot of people's fear. And when people are afraid, they have a tendency of voting or pushing themselves for safety. And are we seeing that the lack of the politicians from one side not protecting the citizens at large, or people feeling not protected, is it giving pause to people stating that they're maybe shifting their point of view in terms of what they're going to be voting for in November? Now, again, I'm hearing this from a number of people who are starting to wrestle with this decision. And I'm wondering if this is becoming more of a wide-ranging thing. The other factor that I'm hearing is the concern about Joe Biden's mental state. In an interview that he just did today that was brought up in one of my groups, he made mention of the fact that he was with a nurse and he was trying to be praising of them. And he was speaking about it in the hospital, and they were blowing in his nose, which is not a procedure. And it was just like a bizarre interaction. But I know I happened to heard it and I found it humorous, but a lot of people started to get a little bit nervous because, I mean, Joe Biden always made gaffes through his entire political career. But I think people are starting to question whether or not some of these gaffes, or is there some cognitive decline? And this is more of a video to ask for feedback, whether or not you're hearing about that, whether or not you're seeing that, whether or not people are talking about that. There's the desire for people to not feel the racial discrepancy, people that don't want to ever talk to anybody about what they're voting for. And I think a lot of that happened in 2016, and I think about the polls were wrong in 2016 because there were more people who weren't admitting they were voting for Trump than they actually did. And again, I'm not here to make any judgment one way or the other who you're voting for. That's not the purpose of this. But prior to the last couple of months, I wasn't hearing any of this. And in the last few weeks, this is becoming more and more people are talking about it. I have people that are criticizing where I am about de Blasio's bail reform and the fact that people are feeling unsafe because of it. And they're feeling unsafe that the city is getting more and more shootings. I think that in the area that I am in right now, there's been a shooting almost every night in the last month and a half. So that lack of safety not only makes people sometimes shift their belief system because they don't want to feel safe. And I'm wondering again whether or not you're hearing that, whether or not you're seeing that, whether or not you're feeling that. And again, you don't have to self-disclose. But if you are hearing about it from other people, if you are hearing your friends saying that, or if you are hearing people talking about this, I would really appreciate you give some feedback. Again, I'd like to know, is this a regional aspect where we're only feeling this here? Or is this something that's actually growing as people are seeing this and feeling this? And again, I'm not talking about it from any political point of view. I don't care whether or not you're pro, not pro, whether you are voting for Trump, not voting for Trump, whether you hate him or not. That's not the point of this. And the point of this is not to push or bash Biden. I mean, Biden came out and said that he was against defunding the police. That's what his stated idea was. The problem is that the people around him and the nature of who he's talking to in the party are not as clear in their message. And when you have a party that's giving a different message than the head of the party, it gets you into a little bit of trouble. He also, in one interview, seemed to denote that he would look into defunding, speaking with somebody, I think who had ALS in a wheelchair. And what he was really meaning is that they'll take away funds from police departments that were not meeting certain standards. But again, what those standards are and what those standards make and how you view that then might create a backward cycle depending on what that means. And I think it fundamentally goes to how we see policing and how we see safety. So with that in mind, I want to take a look at something, not about Biden, not about Trump, but Megyn McCain asking Kamala Harris about basically this concept. And I want you to hear her answer. And I think, and again, this is where I'm not sure if I'm correct, I think that the answer she gives is fundamentally scaring the population at large. Now, again, I could be wrong. It could be just regional to here, and most people are not feeling this way. And if they're not, please, I'd like to hear some feedback in the comments to give me some feedback. Also, I'm going to ask that you please share this video to get as much feedback as possible, because I'm trying to see if this is an actual trend or is this something that just is peculiar to where I'm working right now. So with that in mind, I'd like to take a look at this one little video. There it is. And
activists right now are calling for a defunding of the police. The Minneapolis City Council just agreed on a bill on this. Right before I came to tape the show, there was a clip on CNN from a Minneapolis City Councilwoman who said, quote, "It's a place of privilege if someone breaking into your home wants to call the police." This is gaining a lot of steam. Nancy Pelosi this morning just refused to answer if she would support defunding the police. I just want to know from you, do you support defunding and removing police from American communities? And if not, why do you think there's such a hard time being differentiated right now between defunding and reforming police departments?
So, Megan, I think that a big part of this conversation really is about reimagining how we do public safety in America, which I support, which is this. We have confused the idea that to achieve safety, you put more cops on the street, instead of understanding to achieve safe and healthy communities, you put more resources into the public education system of those communities, into affordable housing, into home ownership.
now, this is a fundamental question about crime and what causes what. Does high crime cause problems in the neighborhood, or do neighborhoods cause high crime? Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. In the 1990s, I think it was the 1980s, in New York, there were 2,200 murders a year on average. Mayor Dinkins led the city into one of the worst murder sprees and rioting, and it was a horrible situation where people were very afraid. And there was a person that ran against him, named Rudy Giuliani, who came in. And the reason why it strikes me is because I remember what my fears were when Rudy Giuliani was elected. And not only was he elected once, he was elected twice, which is very unusual. And not only that, after him, Bloomberg, who kept many of the policies of Giuliani, kept the city, and the numbers actually went down. I think the low was 300 murders in a year, which was wonderful. I mean, you're talking about the city was one of the safest cities in the world. And the city streets looked better. There was a vibrance to the city that was very beautiful during that time period. Not to say there weren't issues, but the city was looking much better. When de Blasio became mayor, the first thing you noticed very quickly in New York City was the homeless population which increased. Urination on the streets, feces on the streets, and a whole bunch of other issues started popping up. And then what's gone on is that the shootings and murder has gone up, and by a lot. Now, the aspect of what was changed was the way the policing was done. They got rid of the crime unit. They did a whole bunch of things to, in a sense, dismantle what the police do. And it's having a dramatic effect. And again, what I'm hearing from people is the aspect of how angry they are. There's one African-American female who is going around now. I mean, she is very vehement in her angry, and she's talking about funding the police and being angry. She's actually going on all the Black Lives Matter murals that that de Blasio put up, and she's going around with painting over. What I find ironic about it, and again, is I'm not a big fan of civil disobedience, but what I find ironic is that de Blasio defends the protesters for the George Floyd issue, and when they paint something or they put something on something, he gives them that right. Now this woman is very, very angry, and she's painting over his mural, and he wants her arrested. It's very funny. But the issue isn't, again, that hypocrisy. The issue is that the safety. And again, what Kamala is talking about here is the way that she's envisioning crime. And I think there's a fundamental problem that if you're going to frame crime this way, and it's not a reality based, it's going to create more fear and more harm to people without recognizing it, even though in your heart you have a true mindset of what you think is true. Right? If I have a very good intention, and I think that you'll really enjoy coal, because coal looks delicious, and I try to feed you coal, it's not going to do well for you, even though my intention was to give you something that I thought was good. If it's the wrong thing, it actually can be damaging.
And to access to capital for small businesses, access to health care regardless of how much money people have. That's how you achieve safe and healthy communities.
So Kamala just stated, again, that if you give people these things, you'll have safe communities. Well, I don't think that's accurate if you take a look around the world. Russia, they were given those exact things, and it didn't create a population where there was no crime. In fact, I don't know of any population that was ever devoid of crime. I don't think there's been ever a population in history that had no crime rate. And when you have a false idea that gets propagated and people start hearing it and they start believing it, it starts creating in people a sense of fear because they themselves know it not to be true. And it gives them the impression that if we vote for this other person, I could be in more danger. And again, I think that part of the problem that Biden has had with this perception is that not necessarily is it coming from him, but because Nancy Pelosi did not come out fervently and say, no, we're against this, and because Kamala is saying the things that she's saying here, it's causing more fear in people and associating Biden with this position.
And so we really do need to understand and reimagine what and how we can actually make and help make communities safe. Because here's the bottom line. If you contrast, many communities which have a heavy presence of police to middle and upper middle class suburbs in America, you will not see that presence of police. But what you will see families who have an income that allows them to get through the end of the month. You will see good public schools. You will see people who have access to health care and can afford it. You will see people who have jobs. And so this has to be the conversation,
I also know no community in the United States that doesn't have police. Where that if you, sure there probably are somewhere in the middle of the country where I'm not familiar, but in terms of, populated places, there is always police somewhere because they are needed. The nature of saying that there are suburbs where things are so well and nice, there is no crime, is just factually not true. Crime happens among families. Just saw a video the other day where these kids were literally wailing on each other. The houses, by the way, were beautiful. They had these beautiful back houses. They obviously looked like a very wealthy neighborhood. And these kids were wailing on each other, and the violence was horrific. And wondering when the police was going to show up to arrest the perpetrators. One of the women hit one of the other girls with a bat on the video. So, I mean, I'm sure there will be arrests that take place after the fact. But the nature to believe that crime doesn't take place only in certain places is just factually not true. And it puts a perception out there that somehow only certain areas have to worry about crime.
Is how are we going to be smart in achieving what should be our collective goal, which is that all communities are safe, and knowing that safe communities are usually safe because they are healthy because of a number of things, including the economy, including education, including access to health care. And that's how I think about this.
And I'm going to share, this is how I thought about it before the 90s and seeing what happened with Giuliani in the city. And again, I'm going to say this again, I was abject wrong. If I ever meet Giuliani in person, I'm going to tell him I was absolutely wrong about him in terms of what he did for the city, which is the reason why he had an incredibly high approval rating in the city, and why he was elected twice. And remember, he's a Republican in a very strongly Democratic city. So you have to understand that the reason why that happened was because of the horrible policies that were creating unsafe environment. And the belief that this is the way, that if you just give people these things, crime goes away, is fundamentally untrue. I'm going to show you a couple of minutes just about psychologically different crimes and the way that people think about crime. But this idea that is permeating right now, I think, is the cause of what I'm seeing. Now, again, I could be wrong. And if I am, please, I'd love to hear it. Because I'd love to be able to say, you know something, no, that's not what's going on. This is only a microcosm in this small area because of the amount of shootings here or because of whatever's going on. But I just wanted to get a sense of whether you agree, disagree, or you're seeing the same thing in your neighborhood and around the country.
You know, in many cities in America, over 1/3 of their city budget goes to police. So we have to have this conversation. What are we doing? What about the money going to social services? What about the money going to helping people with job training? What about helping with the mental health issues that communities are being plagued with, for which we're putting no resources? And here's the other thing.
As a mental health worker, I'm very, very happy if they take money and put it into the resource. I don't believe that any of the things you just mentioned would lower the crime rate significantly. And even if you were to say that you're going to put a lot of money into mental health and we're going to get it at the young age, the people that didn't get the services until now would still have no benefit now. Those people will still do what they're going to do. The nature is that sometimes as therapists, you are dealing with sometimes a violent patient. It happens. There are people in psych wards that get attacked by mental health patients. That's the reason why you have security there. It's not a situation where somebody who has mental health issues, therefore there's never any police involvement because it's a mental health issue. People with mental health issues can do very serious crimes. That does not mean, and this is another stigma, that people with mental health do crime. There are many people that never did a crime that suffer with very severe mental health issues. And this again is another stigma put on people that don't deserve it. It's sort of like, oh, those mental health people, they're the ones that commit all the crime. It's not even true. There are a lot of facets that go into crime, and not because of somebody's only their mental health.
When I talk to law enforcement, they know that they don't want to be, nor are they skilled to be the ones who are responding to someone with mental illness or substance abuse or the homeless population. But in many cities, that's what's happening because we are not directing those resources, those public resources, to where they need to go, which is addressing mental health, homelessness, substance abuse, so that we don't have to have a police response because we are smarter.
In this area, it would be very helpful if we did have more resources. It would be helpful to get people the services they need. But I'm going to share this with you. In the years that I've been working, there are many people who don't want those services. That even when you have them, and even when they're offered, they say no. And because they're very ill, they push back. Now, many, many years ago, Bellevue Hospital was a place where many people had mental health issues were kept. And the ACLU fought for their rights to be on the street where they have a decision and a right to be, no matter who tells them what. And it does cause a lot of issues because of it. And again, it's about weighing two ideals. And all weighing of these ideals create consequences. So when the mental health person or the mental health issue, when they didn't have the same, they didn't have the same right, then there was more ability to get them the services they need and get help. There's a famous story that we talk about in our, in the groups I do, is a guy named Mark David Allen. He was from California. He was a severe alcoholic, very severe. And the police were trying to get him services, over and over. And they got him to a hospital, and they got him into a situation, and then he just refused again and said, nope, I'm fine, I have a place to go, I'm leaving. And it was a lie, and just was able to go. He was arrested over 400 times for drunk in public. And in fact, that's the name of the documentary, made by Officer Sperling, who was the police officer who decided to, after I think it was a second 200 arrests, said that he wanted to start documenting this. And it's a horrible display of the system that has failed the people who don't have the mental capacity to make decisions, yet nobody has the legal right to put them and say, you know something, you are past that and we're taking away your right and you need to be getting help forcibly. And because you can't do that, this idea goes right out the window. It's a smoke screen. The person, you say, you need help. The person goes, I don't want any. So this idea of saying we can take care of crime this way is also fundamentally incorrect.
Senator, I hear you loud and clear, and I don't think there's any rational American right now who doesn't think that we need to take a cold, hard look at reforming our police. But there was a video that went viral over the weekend of the mayor of Minneapolis being yelled at saying, yes or no question, are you for defunding the police? So I'm going to ask the same question the protesters asked him. Are you for defunding the police?
How are you defining defund the police?
And there's the problem and why Joe Biden is linked. Because the people in the party, instead of saying absolutely not, which by the way Joe Biden did say, he said that he was $300,000 he wants to give towards the police for training and whatever else he wants to do. But again, when the party has this mindset of what do you mean by that? What do we think we're going to do? It starts to beg the question and the thought process of what that means. And again, for people that want safety, this is a very scary answer. Do you want to say your children should be like maybe? Think about how many people were killed. I mean, the number is like really high at this point since the riots started taking place and the lawlessness happened in the cities. The numbers have shot up dramatically. Children being killed, and I've lost sleep over some of that, of seeing some of these things. It's heart-wrenching. And my heart goes out to these families. Because in the name of, okay, we're going to let people be angry, they're hurting other people. And I don't understand the justification for this at all. We care about people. We say we care about people. But all these people are being killed. Nobody seems to care about. What's worse, it just keeps happening and keeps going on. So when Kamala says, oh, well, what do you mean by defund? Now, that's where the problem comes about. She looks like a politician starting to play lines with people's safety.
I'm not for anything remotely for that, so I would ask the protesters the same thing, but I assume and again, this is something that is new to me, I assume it's removing police, and as Congresswoman Ilhan Omar said, bringing in a whole new way of governing and a law and order into a community. And my understanding, again, this is something that has just come into my understanding recently, is that you would not have police officers like this Minneapolis City Councilwoman said, that I would be a place of privilege if someone broke into my home and I wanted to call the police.
So, again, we need to reimagine how we are achieving public safety in America.
We need to reimagine. Now, if you saw my video on defund the police, I talk about that reimagining. And I talk about the idea of what that could look like, the law of unintended consequences, and how many more people die. Because when you take away that safety net, this is why when the president said to Chris Wallace that Joe Biden is for defunding the police, it was not from Joe Biden himself, and that was absolutely wrong. But it's very strong from the Democratic Party and a whole bunch of voices that are coming out. And even Kamala Harris, who has been pretty big in the Democratic Party, as she was running just recently for president, stating this, I think psychologically scares people.
And to have cities where 1/3 of their entire budget is going to policing, but yet there is a dire need in those same cities for mental health resources, for resources going into public schools, resources going into job training and job creation. Come on, we have to be honest about this, that there is not...
Job creation, mental health services, or children, or safety and police. If you're going to make it a game that way, and you're going to say to people, would you rather have more job training or safety, that if you call the police when you're getting attacked at 4 o'clock in the morning, or if you're getting somebody's breaking into your house, or if you've been in a fight or somebody's taking shots at you, saying, well, at least you have job training, this answer is scary to people. It takes generations to change a society. And again, I don't know of any society ever in the history of the world that was able to get rid of crime. Not in a communist society. I mean, Singapore, which had a very low crime rate, still had a crime rate. And their punishments and their population was very uniform and very high religious belief system, and they were they kept the laws very strict. And it still had a crime rate. You can't get rid of crime totally. So the statement of somehow this pie in the sky thinking, again, I think causes fear. Biden, associated with the party, people now associate it with his position, in which case might change in the future, because if you think it's part of the party, then it's going to change the way that you think he might govern. And if you are also questioning his mental state at the same time, and then you have fear about that, it's going to make you shift your opinion rather quickly.
Actually not a consensus around this, because if there were, we would actually see smarter distribution of resources in our country to address the issues that need to be addressed. Yes.
And Senator, this is Sunny, and I think just to add to the conversation, defunding the police doesn't mean abolishing the police. It means taking some of those funds.
I love how Sunny now tries to get rid of some of the fear, because I think Sunny herself is picking up of her answers like, wait a minute, do you realize what you're saying? No, it doesn't mean that. But actually, if you really understand what defund means, and what the resources are and the police departments get depleted, it would mean that. It would mean less officers, more wait time. Like fire departments. Let's say I said I'm going to defund fire departments. What would happen to fire departments? They would have to close certain places. They get further away from each other, and now it takes them longer to get to fires. And that's the nature of what happens when you defund. So there is a less police because of it. And that's just the nature of the way these things work. So when Sunny comes in to try to rescue her, which I thought was pretty funny, instead of, needing to be rescued. I think she just should have let her speak and finished up the sentences, because this is what happens, and it causes more fear. Because now, psychologically, when people see this, they realize, uh-oh, somebody's trying to protect her from her own answer.
That are typically 1/3 of the budget of a city, and giving some of those funds to services like mental health and education and mental health resources. But I want to change the subject and ask another question. Joe Biden has already committed to choosing a female running mate. Given the current climate, it occurs to me that Biden must also choose a black woman as his running mate.
Now, I love Kamala's answer. She says, just win. And I don't need to go through that. I think, again, this goes back to causing fear. We, as a society, believe in the aspect of the best person for the job. It should be the best person. And if the best person is a female of color, absolutely, that's fine. But that's not what Sunny said. And what's gone on is that there is an impression that there's an identity, there's a pandering for identity politics that's causing people to say, wait a minute, how can I trust? And this is actually not helpful. This is actually hurtful. It's hurtful for a person if they say, I only want somebody who's going to be coming from Japan and is a female. I want somebody from Japan and a female. Well, isn't that what we all call discrimination? So, in a sense, what Sunny is basically saying is that the presidential nominee should not only discriminate based upon sex, he should discriminate based upon color too. And admittingly so. And that's a very scary thought process for, again, people who want to say, wait a minute, best person for the job. Shouldn't it be the best person? And this points us to a direction where we start to get upset and not realize why we think what we think, how we feel about things, and the nature of things. So they talked about crime. But crime is not monolithic either. There isn't just crime. There's crimes like against people, like you have murder and assaults, rape and robberies. And then you have like crime against property, theft, burglary, arson. And then you have victimless crimes, although they're not victimless, but victimless crimes they call, such as prostitution, such as drugs, and such as gambling, right? So these would all be what's called victimless crimes. All those things are done by different groups and different people. And the nature of what they do and how they do it is different. So the fact that they're looking at crime as being this monolithic thing, that if we just take care of this issue, we gave people houses and health care and all this stuff, it will just make crime go away, is factually not true. The populations that I've dealt with that have committed crimes, most of them had health care, most of them had places to live, most of them even had jobs at certain points. And it didn't stop them from committing crimes. There are, again, many different types of crime. And this almost childlike way of approaching it is not going to bring people to feel safe and secure. So, again, please, tell me if I'm right, tell me if I'm wrong. I'd love to hear this. And please, the biggest thing I'm asking here is even more than liking the video or subscribing to the channel or going to Subcribe-star to become a patron, is to share this with other people, specifically as many people you can around, just to get some feedback. Are they thinking and feeling the same way because of this issue? I thank you very much. Have a good night and good mental health.